Good evening, everyone. Welcome to my another demonstration video. So it is a second part of the video which I have uploaded just before it. So in this video, I am going to explain about the remaining two tasks that I have said in the previous video, that I have got the approx 13 tasks to implement, that is given by my team leader. So all the something 11 up to 11 tasks I have completed. The remaining two and the major tasks uh, is pending to demonstrate with the technical and functional part. So in this video I am going to explain about those two tasks in very deep manner, with the proper explanation of the what is the functional responsibility and what is the functional use of that task, and the how I code that tasks. So let me show you what are those two tasks. So here it is. Okay, so basically let's go to the 14 one. Then I'm going to 13 task after this. So it states that if a status is final, if status is final status, success or failed, means we have considering the two status as the final status, that are the success and fail, that doesn't update any other status, just log as error. Means as we are building and tracking our each transactions with a particular status, that we have the five status in our status management system, that is the created, initiated, pending, success and failure. So this states that any status, either success or failure, can be updated in the database when we call like the our handlers, specific status handlers like created, initiated. So the all status handlers have tasks to update the corresponding status to the DB. Corresponding means which we have get as the initiated to initiate the make initiate status, created initiated handler to make status as created, and another like same goes for the pending, success and failure. But before updating any status into a DB, as we build a system that can update just when we want to update some status of particular transaction, we just call one handler and give it as a requested what is status to be updated, and it just updated the status and returns the true or false. True means updated, otherwise false if there is some error comes or it is not updated. So we have to very careful when we updated those transaction, those status of particular transactions. Like if the transaction is like if the transaction status has success saved in a database or failure, then it should not be updated. Now means it is a final status. If it is updated like final updated to the initiated, success updated to the initiated or pending, that it is very disastrous for the application. So we have to check if a transaction should not has status as success or failed, then we should not update it. We simply discard and throw the error. So I have implemented that. To implement this, I have to return a logic in each transaction handler. For created transaction handler, pending transactional handler, initiated transaction handler, success transaction handler, and failure transaction handler. So in each transaction handler, I have written this logic, same logic. If current status is either success or failed, I throw the error, else I'm going to update that as a request wants, means what the request wants to update the transaction. So let me show you the code what I have done. So let's open the code one by one. Like just I want to create like status handler na. So let me open the status handler. Here it is the status handler interface. Means these have some methods This is not a status handler, it is a payment status service in which the status handler comes in the picture. So let me control T, go to the payment service IMPL. Okay, so these are the five methods, five separated methods which have the responsibility to update the transaction status. So, but the main method is the process status. This is the main method, and which is implemented via a transaction is status handler. All the transaction status handlers which implements that. So we have the common and the main overridden method is called as the process status. So let me go into it. F3 control P. So these are the five. These are the five status handlers which implements the transaction status handlers and which they have overwritten this method. So let me go to the any one of them. Like let's go through the pending status handler. Okay, this is the pending status handler. As I can see here, you can see here it is the pending status handler. So its logic is to, this is the main logic. This I have explained in the earlier video. If the which status want, it just update the table transaction table with the new transaction status. This is the another logic, but this is the main part which I have implemented in all the five status handlers. So as I commented it, before updation in the transaction status, first check if the current status should not be success or failed. Means if it is failed, means throw error. Here I have written the condition. So for that I have to check the condition for the particular transaction. How to check the in the particular transaction? There it is defined as the transaction reference. We just go to the transaction reference and load the data and check the corresponding status. So I haven't written the new method in the transaction DAO IMPL, as we have created the load transaction method for loading the transaction. When we call the initiate method or initiate in API call invoke, so we have to load the transaction which we saved in the database while creating the transaction, while saving the transaction as the created status. So we used this method only. We are not going to create any method. We using this existing one which is basically loads the data with the transaction reference. So we just call this method again. This gives us the transaction DTO while after converting that entity and DTO object. So let me close this, and it just give us the what, all the data which corresponding to of the data of the particular transaction reference. So after getting this data, all the data we got in the transaction DTO, like all the fields we have got and fetched from the database successfully. And here I take it out as status, which is basically a string, fetch DTO.get status. And if here we are again using some enums, if current status equals transaction status enum success dot get status, or current status equals transaction status that is failed, which is basically fetching the name success or failed. We are not hard coded it, so we use the enums here. If it is failed, we have defined one error code, that is the payment already completed. Here I have defined it as payment already completed 2004. Okay, 20,004. Okay, 20,004 as 20,004 status with the proper message. So simply returning this means through object. If it is not, then rest of the code will execute further. And this method I have written for all the status handler, for pending, for success also. Here it is the success. Here it is the initiated, and here it is the failed. So let me check. Let's check this, and after testing this, it is working fine or not. It should be give error if we updated any success or failed status. It should give error. So let me test this. I'm going to show you how it's working fine or not. It is working fine or not. So for that, let's test it. So I'm going to modify one table here. that in the previous video I have created this ID and tested it is initiated successfully. Let me mark as 5. 5 means success. So it should give us the error. Okay. So we expect that it should give error. 5201 ID is this. I have already saved here. Okay. So let's fire this. Firstly, I have to start the server. Okay. Complete. Okay. Now let me test this. Let's go. Payment already completed, can't process it. We have tested it successfully. Means our code is working fine as we expected. Means warning. Error code and error message. There is no exceptions. Means properly all the means properly our controller advice comes into the picture and handle those exceptions. And so there is no change in database. There is no change in database. S5 S5 means the initiate is not initiated. Means if the code is not working fine, then it should be updated as 2. So it is not updated, means it is working fine, and we executed that part for checking the current status working fine as expected. Now this task is completed. For all it's going to work fine because all the codes are the same for every uh, other status handlers. Now let me go to revert this. No, let's go to the one, because I'm going to test the another task, so I make it as one. So let's go to the another one task. What is the task is? Transaction log logic. Okay, so we have one table called transaction log in our database. This is a table which have ID, transaction ID, status from to status creation. Okay, so this is table we have because every transaction, each transaction, when is going to update, like we have the life cycle of the status. The first it should be created, then it should be initiated, then pending, then success or failure. Not like that the created and just success. So for testing this, we have the logs. Basically, it is a transaction log table. We are like this simply for checking purpose or debugging purpose, as we have logs. So we have maintained a log table to uh, check every transaction should pass through a uh, standard, or I can say that's the proper following the proper life cycle of the status. Means it should be like one by one, created to initiated to pending to successful. Yeah, it doesn't jumps from one to another. It should be in a proper manner. So for that we have created a log, and every log it is triggered. This table is triggered when we updated any transaction into a table. So it should be automatically updated here only. Means if we just created, so it should be from a status dash to created. Like if we initiated the transaction, then it should be created to initiated. If we going to make the transaction status as pending, then it should be from initiated to pending, like that. So for debugging purpose, for history purpose or something else, we got this table transaction log. So this code is also I have completely coded and executed with proper testing. So let me okay, functionally I have explained it to why it is important, why we should have this transaction log to just check the every transaction that it should pass with the proper life cycle of the status. Now let me show you the code. For that, it is a separate table. So let me close this. It is a separate table. So as the standard says, every table should have the separate entity. So we got the entity, call that transaction log entity. These have some methods. Okay. Status from to means the current status from status, the current status which is saved, okay, which is saved in database earlier. And to status means transaction to status which is in the DTO object and we are going to update it. This is my this means that what is the from status and to status. What is the transaction ID? Transaction, here it is the, here the transaction ID is not the transaction reference, it is a auto incremented transaction ID which is generated by the transaction table, and it is a foreign key in this table, that is transaction log table. Now let's as I said before, okay, as I said before, it should be have it should have the proper another DAO class. So here it is the DAO class, create transaction log. We have only mm, one we have only one logic to just create another transaction from to and with a proper creation date. So there is not much method here, it is only created. Let's check implemented class. Okay, just create. Here it is the one method only, create transaction. Let me close this, let me close this, and let's open any handler, create status handler. Okay, so after checking, let me go, not it is quite, let me go to the initiated. Okay, after checking the success and failed, okay, after checking the success and failed, then it's executed from status to status. Okay, it is executed like from which status to which status. Now I am going to save it into database. After that, when the status is updated successfully, not like that firstly we log the table and if the initiated update transaction doesn't work fine or it gives some error, then the logic is very different, and it is not working, it is not good. So after inserting the status successfully into the database, if the response come is true, means it is saved successfully, updated successfully, then we have to insert the log. For log, we just create the transaction log DTO, like it is corresponding as the transaction log entity. Same, we have got the three fields here also. We are building using the builder pattern. So we required the three fields, from status to status and transaction ID. How we got the transaction ID? Okay, we can got from the this object only transaction ID because we have loaded it, we got it here. Okay, when we got the transaction ID, we got the, when we load the particular details of the transaction, then we got also particular ID of this. So by that we can get the transaction ID. From status we also got from this transaction log DTO, because this is the only object now which is going to convert going to convert into entity and then saved into the database. We have only these details. Every updation, in every updation we have just this object, and what is the field in these objects, we are going to update it here. So from status and ID we got fetched successfully. It is not working for the created status handler, there it is another logic, I am going to explain it also. But after created, those initiated, like initiated, pending, success and failure, the all the logics are the same. Now we got the transaction DTO, we fetch the ID, we fetch the status. What is the current status? Means current no, not current. Current we fetch from the DTO. What is the updated transaction? For that, okay, I quite missed match here. I'm sorry. It is quite missed match. The current status which we are going to save is in the transaction DTO, means to status. Okay, to status. I just opposite that while explaining. The DTO transaction got only what? The current is current not. What is the status going to be updated? Means to status. In which status we are going to update the payment. So from the DTO logic we got that. For from an ID we have to fetch the data. Okay, we have to fetch the data. We have to fetch the data from the database. Then we convert this, when we loaded this into the log DTO, then we are going to save into the transaction table, transaction log table. So for that we are going to load it. So how we can load, as we have the load transaction into our DAO, but we call the DAO here only, like this. For what? For checking the current status. For checking the current status, if it is failed or not, we are calling here. So why we can't use this here also? We are not going to call again the load transaction to load the ID and the current status in the table. We loaded the fetch DTO. That's why we loaded the whole transaction. Why we have only we have one more option, that we have to fetch only the status. Why we load all the object? So here it is the requirement to get the ID and the current status of the particular transaction. So we load it and just set. And what is the status to be updated? It is in the DTO, because this DTO is going to convert it into entity, and after that entity going to save into the database now. So that's why we have got this. Now for the status handler, it is quite good for the either for the initiated, pending, success and failure, but in created it is quite different. It is not same like that. So let me explain about that also, why it is not like that created. So as the created says, we can't load the transaction now, because the transaction doesn't exist. We are going to load it. We are going to load it means we are going to create the transaction. Earlier, that reference, we have no reference ID for that. After saving, we got the reference ID. That is going to save into the database. That is saved in the database. So we are not return the logic of getting status means that logic of getting status either success or failed is not applicable in this created status handler, because the status is not created till now. So how the status is failed or success? So what is the purpose to check that? It is irrelevant. So we are not going to check here. So for that we have to firstly create the transaction. Then we got the response back. Then the response is all the data is in DTO. We can use the DTO here, but not we can't use the DTO. We use the DTO as the current now. But how we got the ID? The main target is to got the ID also. We have to save the transaction ID, and transaction ID is generated after we save the database. After we save the transaction into the database, then we got the ID. It is auto incremented. So after saving it, it is only possible to get the ID. So for that we are going to, after initiated, we are going to call the load transaction here. That the transaction is saved, we are going to load the transaction. Then which from that DTO has the transaction reference. From the transaction reference we load the data from transaction. It got all the data with the transaction ID and with the current status, which is saved into the database, that is created. Now after that, the main logic of that is, while logging the created status, it is from the dash dash to created. So that dash dash is default, it is hard coded. Dash dash means it is default, means the first transaction is from dash dash to created. Na? We don't have any status before created, so it is dash dash. So here it is the from status dash dash to created, and with the time also. ID fetched from the load data, created we can get from the transaction DTO, either from the fetch DTO. Fetch DTO also have the same as created, and the transaction DTO. So I use here the transaction DTO. Here it is the logic of the transaction log, all the logics. So why it is different from created and versus another status handlers? Because we are not till created the transaction, so we can't get the transaction ID. So after that, after loading or after creating the transaction, then we have to call the load transaction. Uh, Other than that, all the status handlers already created. means they are already created. That's why we got the transaction reference and we can load the data. But till now we don't have the transaction reference. It is not present in the table. How can we load that? How can we get that? So it is for the transaction uh, log logic that states here. We have to log every status. Let's check it. So let me go to the this. Yeah, I'm going to refresh it. This is created. Let me delete again, delete and delete. I'm going to check it now again. So for demonstration, it is empty. Let me refresh. Empty. Now it is one. I'm just going to call with this transaction reference the second API, that is the initiate payment, and it should be logged from created to initiated. We are expecting that it should be logged from the particular transaction ID. What is the transaction ID of this status? That is 20. So here we should got the 20 from created to initiated. Let's fire. Okay, initiated. Okay, we got the response here, success, no error. Let's check to the database. Refresh. Okay, 20, as I say, it should be 20. It is 20. Created to initiated date something 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 like 9:56, 12:56, or it is 12:56. Now okay, it is successfully created. Okay, let me check one, let me test one new payment with the new payment. Okay, let's go here. I'm going to update is as 122. Okay, all remains same. We got the new transaction reference. Here it is, the new transaction reference. Let's copy this. We are making as initiated also. Let's check it here. It is saved here or not. Okay, 122 saved new transaction reference. Let's check the log. Log should be updated like this. Okay, 21 dash created. It is working fine. Let's initiate this. Let me save this. What is this? Let me save this. 50 paste. Oh, what is this? Let me copy this. Is this happening? Okay, paste. Save. Shoot. Initiated. Good. Let's check the log. Log should be initiated, like created to initiated. This is how can we get each and every details, and when, how, what is the time between the created to initiated, initiated to pending. We can judge from that, and we can analysis from that how much time is taken to complete the each transaction. So, and for the error and debugging, it is very helpful. Here it is also b2, it is true, and like this, all the logs working fine. So this is all the demonstration of the two major tasks that I have completed successfully. So I hope I explained well. Thank you so much.